با ساختمان برادر ما حمله کرده بودن، چند تا RPG زده بودن تو اتاقش که ایشون فرار کنه بیاد ایران، ولی ایشون مونده بود و با مسئولان حزب الله بالاخره مسئله رو تمام کرد.
ما يعني من يملك المال يملك السلطة. دولة بحجم إيران ينافسها أفراد لا يملكون شيئا، شيء طبيعي أن تغلبهم.
And here he is. What a moment. Coming down the steps with his father.
Over the next 2.5 months, one by one, the hostages were released. The last one out was an American reporter who had been in captivity for 6 years.
Mr. Anderson, your freedom is a victory for all. Welcome back. Thank you, sir. I'm very grateful.
When Terry Anderson was released, the president said, you know, it lifts a huge burden, not only the human part of the hostage, but it overshadowed everything we did on the Middle East. And suddenly that cloud was lifted.
Hostage-taking is hell on a human scale.
Now Iran waited for America's side of the goodwill deal.
The Iranians start calling me and say, well, you know, what's happening? What's happening? We are in a difficult position at home. They say the president has helped the Americans, and now where is the thank you note?
Johnny Pico said the Iranians are expecting a gesture. And he said, we've got to be fair, because I promised them. And I said, Johnny, I will try. I sat down with the National Security Council principals, and we discussed it, and I said, we have a commitment. And the president was sympathetic to me.
The problem, as I told General Scowcroft in that meeting, was the Iranians were now deeply engaged in other acts of terrorism that made it very, very hard to do anything to improve the relationship.
In the 3 years since President Bush's promise, many critics of the Iranian regime had been assassinated in the West. America blamed Iran's leaders, and the Supreme Leader had issued a fatwa calling on all Muslims to kill the novelist Salman Rushdie.
When we said goodwill begets goodwill, we did not say, if the Iranians release the hostages, no matter what else, we are going to respond favorably. We said goodwill would beget goodwill. Well, doing other acts of terrorism is not my definition of goodwill.
Everyone else said Iran is behaving so badly in so many different ways that now to reward them by lifting some of the sanctions we had, or making trade deals, or some of the things that would have that the Iranians would have wanted, is just impossible for us. And I lost the argument.
وقتی که آمریکایی‌ها درست عمل نمی‌کردن به وعده‌هاشون، کار ناقص می‌موند.
Rafsanjani's gamble had not paid off. For his remaining 5 years as president, he made no further attempt at political reconciliation with America. In 1997, Rafsanjani came to the end of his 2 terms as president. The Supreme Leader and the establishment had chosen a candidate, and they were used to winning. But some sought an alternative. They turned to an unusually liberal cleric who was more likely to open doors to the West.
معتقد بودم این دیدگاهی به اسلام که با آزادی و مردم سالاری، با استقلال و پیشرفت سازگار میشه. در دوران وزارت هم که بودم، سعی کردم با توجه به همه شرایط این دیدگاه رو بهش وفادار باشم و در یک برهه‌ای احساس کردم که مشکلاتی وجود داره و استعفا دادم.
Khatami had encouraged free expression. This had angered the hardline supporters of the Supreme Leader, but had won in backing among intellectuals and students.
ایشون همچنین از اونجایی که منتقد وضع موجود بودن، خب برای اکثریت مردم هم که اعتراض داشتن به شرایط موجود گزینه مناسبی بودن.
طبعا با توجه به جایگاهی که رهبری در نظام ما داره و تأثیری که میتونن داشته باشن، برای من مهم بود که ببینم که من اگر با این ایده و با این فکر میام نظر ایشون چی است.
To persuade the Supreme Leader to let him stand against the establishment's candidate, Khatami put a subtle argument.
آقای خاتمی بهشون گفتم ذهنیت وجود داره در جامعه که مثلا از قبل میخوان آقای ناطق نوری به هر شرایطی رئیس جمهور بکنن. بهتر هستش که اجازه بده انتخابات آینده رقابتی باشه. آقای خاتمی بهشون گفتم من هم میام و حالا مطمئنم نیستم که رأی بیارم.
ایشون هم استقبال کردن و طبعا از این جهت برای من هم یه موقعیت مناسبی بود که فکر کردم که دست کم رهبری مخالف نیستن با آمدن من.
Khatami seemed to be facing an uphill struggle. Iran is huge, and he was not well known outside Tehran.
از مسائلی که مشکلات جدی نامزد ریاست جمهوری ما بود که هم ما امکانات نداشتیم، امکانات مالی محدودی داشت و هم رسانه‌ای در اختیار نبود و نگرانی نسبت به این که بشه با مردم ارتباط برقرار کرد نگرانی مهمی بود.
و من باید روبرو و چهره به چهره با مردم همراه باشم و به همین دلیل با اتوبوس هم نوعا رفتم و تقریبا به همه مراکز استان سر زدم.
مردم برای اولین بار با کسی که میخواستن بهش رأی بدن ارتباط مستقیم پیدا میکردن.
برای خود منم تعجب آور بود در همون دیدارهای اول استقبال مردم و احساس میکردم که مردم یک نوع تغییر و یک نوع تحولی رو طلب میکنن.
خب هر جا می رفتیم این هجوم جمعیت بود به این ستادها، صف‌های طولانی، اساساً واقعاً غافلگیر کننده بود.
Khatami won by a landslide, large enough to make him feel he could challenge the core of the Islamic Republic's foreign policy.
ملت بزرگ و متمدن آمریکای سخن متمدنانه تاریخی دارم و در موقعیت خودش انشاءالله با اونها طرح خواهیم کرد و سخن خواهیم گفت و امیدوارم که هرچه این گفتگوهای متفکرانه بیشتر بشه ما به صلح و آرامش بیشتر نزدیک میشیم.
The new president would have to tread carefully. The powers now passed on to him could at any time be overruled by the supreme leader.
کسانی در ایران بودن که این بدبینی‌هاشون خیلی قوی‌تر بود و به هیچ وجه نمی‌تونن تصور بکنن که یک روز ما میتونیم با آمریکا در عین حفظ منافع ملیمون یک تفاهمی داشته باشیم که من معتقد بودم این نه لازم نیست که الالعبد اینجوری باشه.
He launched his new policy towards America by agreeing to an interview with Christiane Amanpour. Not only was she half Iranian, but she worked for the largest global TV news network.
We got final word, CNN, that this in fact was going to happen. I was on my first holiday with my very serious boyfriend, who happened to be a State Department official.
And I think her due diligence was to find out what the U.S. government was waiting to hear from the Iranians, and she had the U.S. government right beside her. So she did what any journalist would do.
I went into, okay, what shall I ask him mode?
And I did what I was supposed to do, which was to identify for her the things the U.S. government cared about.
And I said to him, I have to ask about the hostages. I have to ask about terrorism in the Middle East peace process.
For Americans, it was the hostage-taking that put Iran beyond the pale. I do remember saying to her, if Khatami was really different, he had to acknowledge that Iran had done something wrong here.
As the interview began, Khatami and Amanpour were aware that the American